Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to this Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and really, I hope, and yes, I'm excited today to be here with you, but really, I hope that you personally, you listening to this podcast or watching this video, I hope that right now, in this moment, you are able to attend to the moment without judgment, with acceptance, with allowing some compassion in your heart for directed inward and directed outward, and that you meet this moment, this present moment, with curiosity, with the desire to understand, not the desire to judge, not the desire to label, but the desire to understand. Because I know that if you are doing this, right, if you are able to, in this present moment, attend to this presence, to do so with acceptance, with curiosity, and with compassion for yourself and others, well, then I know what you're able to do then is at least you're well on your way to the ability to regulate yourself in the face of your emotions. And that is, quite frankly, one of the biggest skills that any of us can hope to develop, right? Because when we can regulate ourselves in the face of our emotions, which means to regulate the reactivity that we might have to what we're feeling, and instead, replace reactivity with response. If we are able to do that, then everything around us changes, right? Everything. Right? Because the way that we, respond to the other people in our lives, the way that we respond to the circumstances of our lives, the traffic jams, the difficulties at work, the dog pooping on the bathroom floor, the snowstorms, the ice storms, the tragic news that we see on our feeds, and even the beautiful news that we receive from friends and family, right? If we can attend to this without judgment, and with full acceptance of what is happening, allowing compassion to come into this for ourselves and for everyone else that we see and touch and experience, and doing that again with the openness of curiosity, well, then again, the ability to regulate ourselves within the confines of all of those things that happen, right? Then you start to affect those around you, right? Because when you can respond in a way that is appropriate, in a way that is constructive, in a way that is compassionate and accepting and present, well, then that is going to ripple out to those around you in a really, really beautiful way. Now, notice that I'm not saying that, that you should avoid snowstorms. You should move somewhere where it doesn't snow or it doesn't get icy in the wintertime, because we see that doesn't work, right? Texas hasn't had snow like they're seeing now probably ever. And yet here it is, right? And so notice that I didn't say move to somewhere. I didn't say give up your dog for adoption because he pooped on the floor. I didn't say, don't watch the news. I didn't say remove yourself from social, media and all the different, sources of information. I didn't say any of that, because you can't do that. Right? Just like moving to Texas is not going to make you, is not going to allow you to never see snow again, right? Turning off the news it's not going to mean that you're never going to experience bad news, right? Or hurtful news and news that makes your heart suffer, right? Because life comes at us and we can't control it. Right? We can't control the weather. We can't control the behavior of other people. We can't control the circumstances we find ourselves in. We can't control drivers out there. We can't control, what happens in a grocery store. We can't control how somebody makes our latte in the morning. All we can do, there's only one thing that we have control over, and that is our own reactivity. That's it. Everything else beyond that is a fantasy. right? And you can indulge in that fantasy if you want to. I don't know that there's anything necessarily wrong with it, as long as you know that it's a fantasy, right? But you can indulge in it. You can say, well, I want to surround myself with positive people. I want to surround myself with beautiful things in my home. I want to have cut flowers and plants all over my home because it makes me feel good. That's fine, right? As long as that's in the context of the understanding that you can't, just doing that doesn't mean that life's sometimes ugliness is not going to come into your awareness, into your experience, right? That it just doesn't work that way. And this brings us to a really, really important, subject that we talk about here in this podcast a lot. And I actually just went back and looked at all the different podcasts and just because I know I've talked about this before. So I wanted to see, how recently it was. And it was actually just about a month ago. It was actually a month and 3 days ago. It was on January 14th, which happens to be my wife's birthday. Go her. And that was the last time that I talked about this topic. And so a month is a good enough time to get a refresher on this because, again, this is something that is so vital in the understanding of all that I talk about here in this podcast and YouTube channel. And the thing that I'm referring to, right, is it's almost like Gandhi said, right? At least this is a quote attributed to Gandhi. You never really know, right? But the quote attributed to Gandhi is, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." Right? Because that's what happens, right? As I started to say or tried to say earlier, when we change the way that when we stop reacting in an automatic, uncontemplative, unmeasured way, and we start, responding in a contemplative and measured way, right? That is the change that we wish to see in everyone else. Right? And that change in us is again going to start reflecting back to us in the behavior of those who experience us. It's simply how it works, right? And especially this, and of course, it's especially true and it's strongest in the nuclear family, right? So like if you live in a home like I do with 3 other people, well then those 3 people are going to be the first ones to experience that, right? And are going to change the most dramatically. And then the next ring is your close friends and associates. The next ring is your coworkers. The next ring then is more anonymous people. The next ring then is strangers, right? So that's how it kind of radiates out. But either way, right? When we can, because remember, the only thing we can change or the only thing we can control, we can change things. Sure we can, I could go out and, I could go and tell somebody I never want to see them again and make it very clear. And I might never see that person. So that's a change I can make for, changing someone else's behavior on some level. It is possible, but I can't control it, right? I can tell somebody that I don't want to see them again. I can tell them that for whatever reason I don't want them part of my life, but I cannot control whether they come into my life or not, right? All I can control is how I respond to them coming back into my life. I'm happy to tell you that I don't have anybody in my life like that. There's nobody who I want to cut out of my life. And that's kind of the beauty of this, right? Is that as we work on ourselves and as we develop that level of acceptance, right, then it doesn't matter. Like I don't get bothered by people in that way. Sure, there's people who I don't enjoy their company. They arise in me, feelings that I don't enjoy and that are not good, not pleasurable, right? And so I might, if I'm invited to a party, I might decline the invitation. It doesn't mean that you have to expose yourself to things that cause you, pain and difficulty, right? But the pain and difficulty is something that is caused by someone else, and that's something you can't control. But what you can control is how much you suffer in the face of that pain and difficulty. And so this brings, again, the Gandhi quote. It's funny. Gandhi has come up in my life and in my talking, like 4 times or so in the last week. So it was pretty amazing. So I had to throw a Gandhi quote in here for you. Another quote, another thing about Gandhi that a lot of people don't realize, and I read this, I read a Facebook quote of a friend who was reading Gandhi's biography, and so I didn't even get it firsthand. But apparently, until Gandhi was 48 years old, he was an unnoticeable, very, very inconsequential clerk in an office. He was, I think it was a patent office that he worked in London, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. So literally, the man, until he was 48 years old, he was nothing more. Well, I mean, nothing more. That's not the right way to say that, but he was, he was simply an anonymous clerk in an anonymous office. And, just like, how many clerks in offices have there been in the history of humanity, and we have no idea who they are, right? Because there's nothing remarkable about them, right? Of course, if you know someone who's a clerk in an office, that's remarkable to you because you're connected to them. But there's nothing, historically remarkable about someone who just worked in an office their whole life, right? But yet, especially in the work that I do, where I work with people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s even, I might have one person in their 60s, a lot of people come to me and say, well, it's too late for me to make these changes. My life is kind of over at this point. I've lived my life. What am I going to do at this point? That's when I tell them the story about Gandhi, that at 48 years old, that guy quit his job and went on to change the world. Right? And so, that's just another little factoid about Gandhi and something for you to consider next time you feel like, oh, I'm too old to change that. I don't think I could ever, be different from how I am. I'm just set in my ways, all this, Think about Gandhi in those moments, all right? And every time I tell somebody that, I see their shoulders like lift up and their eyes brighten, and they're like, really? Really? That gives me such hope, And so I hope it gives you hope too, right? But getting back to the original quote of Gandhi is, be the change that you want to see in the world, right? A lot of times we think, and I've talked about this a whole bunch, that we feel as though happiness and wellness and our satisfaction in life, right? It's going to come from somewhere outside of us, right? It's going to come with the people we surround ourselves in. It's going to come from the pictures on our walls and the plants and the flowers and all that stuff that I talked about before. And those things will bring you a measure of joy, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like Marie Kondo, I think it's called, the lady with the clutter. She says if it strikes joy in your heart, right, then keep it, right? But if it doesn't, get rid of it, right? And so there is something there, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with having things that make you feel joy. But again, just like we said before, it's okay as long as you understand that is part of, this overriding kind of fantasy, right? That those things are not, they might be bringing you joy, but they are not the cause for your happiness. The cause for your happiness is something that can only come from inside. And that really relates back to the whole, concept of acceptance, right? That, as I said, I wrote this on Facebook the other day, that it is not the experience that makes us suffer. It is the unwillingness or inability to accept the experience that makes us suffer. And I was called out by a couple of people who I went on to have a civil conversation with. You might remember me talking about this the other day, and people accuse me of toxic positivity, and one person called me a 1-minute guru, right? And I said, I'm neither of those things, and that's not what this is about, right? Because people say that, like, suffering, like if people are born into poverty, or people are, abused, or people are, have violence, crimes committed against them, right? That, people equate suffering with that. And yes, there is suffering involved with that, of course, right? I personally was once a victim of a violent crime myself, right? And this is how I'm going to illustrate to you what I mean by this acceptance and how important it is, right? I was attacked very late one night, I was stabbed and I was beaten. Right. And I was literally left for dead, and I was bleeding, and they nicked an artery that they didn't mean to nick. I don't believe, they ran away. They left me for dead, literally. But on the outside of your leg, you have these little branches that are, kind of tributaries for your arteries, if you will. And one of those was open. And so I bled a lot. All right. I'm sorry if this offends anybody or makes anybody yucky or whatever. But literally lost like 7 pints of blood or something like that, right? So like half the blood in my body, right? And I did not have to have a blood transfusion. Like I had just enough blood left in my body that they were able to do it. And thankfully, for me, my instinct had me crawl out of the building in which I was attacked and then literally put my body halfway into Canal Street in New York City at like 4:30 in the morning on December 7th of 1997, right? And so like literally put myself in the street because I knew that was the only way I was going to live, right? And so this was a very traumatic experience for me, right? And a lot of trauma was experienced by me because of this experience, right? And I had to heal on a number of different ways, right? There was a lot of pain involved. There was a lot of, not only just physical pain, but also emotional pain. I was in the hospital for 7 days, right? And, in the hospital, like it was not comfortable, right? Especially I was in intensive care for like 5 of those 7 days or something like that. So it's not a comfortable thing, right? You're up all night, you're up all the time, right? Somebody's either poking at you or checking something. You hear all the beeping, you hear other people, just pain and all kinds of stuff happening, right? So even in the recuperation, there was continuance of the trauma that was happening. And so out of that experience, right, I was in a very hard place and I needed to heal. And so I had to take physical therapy to heal the muscles that had been not only, harmed by the initial, attack, but also the emergency surgery I had to have the next morning when the artery opened back up, right? I was in the hospital and they literally like crash cart stuff going on. It was crazy. So I had to heal my muscles. My vein had to heal. I had to take iron and to build up my hemoglobin, and it was like I don't know if you've ever been on iron, but it causes like constipation isn't even the word, right? And so there was a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, and I'm putting air quotes for all you in the podcast, right? There was a lot of pain and what you might call suffering going on, right? And so I had to do therapy to get through that. I had to have therapy on my muscles. I had to have therapy on my blood. I had to have therapy for my mind too, because I was traumatized. Like I literally, if somebody was 5 minutes late, if somebody, if my young sisters at the time, because I went, at the time I was like 20 something years old anyway, I went to, I stayed with my parents for a while, back in my old bedroom from when I was in high school and stuff, right? And it was like that kind of vibe, right? And so my younger sisters who were, in their early 20s or whatever, they were out, just doing their thing, right? The same thing I would have done, right? But because they, I literally had this gripping anxiety that was so hard for me to deal with, right? Because I thought they were being attacked. Like it was a real, PTSD was a very, very real thing for me, right? And I had to do therapy to get through that, right? But even with all of that therapy, I still was suffering. Right? Because the suffering was, even though my body was healed and even though my mind was healing and recuperating and recovering, I still had this suffering. And the suffering came from, late at night when I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm thinking about what those people did to me. And I'm going through like, was it my fault? Should I have not been in that place? Did I do something wrong? If I had only done this differently, if I could have only been less drunk when I got attacked, I could have fought them off. If only there had been a police officer there. If only the lock on my building had been, working properly and these guys wouldn't have gotten into the building where they ambushed me, right? And all of these thoughts, right? Like, what is wrong with me? I was telling myself. And that's where the suffering lives, right? Yes, it's suffering to feel pain, right? And it's suffering to go through that process, right? That could be called suffering for sure. But the true suffering happens on the back end of that thing, right? The true suffering comes from me and what I was putting into this whole thing. Right? The feeling of self-doubt and doubting my self-worth and not allowing myself to be kind to myself. Right? And this came because I was not willing to accept what had happened to me. And it was only the day where I decided that I could accept it, and this happened many, many years later. And I was suffering the entire time, but it was only that day that I was able to accept the fact that this is what happened. And no matter what I might think, no matter what I might try to change in my mind, it's only in accepting what happened that I was able to release the suffering that I was feeling. Right? This brings to mind, this whole concept of working on ourselves, because you see what happened there, right? It had nothing to do with anybody else, right? It wasn't, some relationship that changed it for me. It wasn't, some safety course that changed it for me. It wasn't stopping drinking, because it took a long time after that for me to do that, right? Which shocks me to this day. You would have thought that I learned, the doctors in the emergency room, first of all, they when they were releasing me from the hospital, they were like, I don't ever want to see you that drunk again, because that's dangerous in and of itself. Like literally, that's how bad it was. Didn't stop me, right? It's not moving to a new place. It wasn't, getting, was nothing that changed anything except what was happening in here. Right. And this brings to mind, I talked to one of my wonderful clients yesterday. I'm really dying for another word that's not clients, something to describe people I work with that's not the word client, because it feels so businessy and just not right. It's not what I feel when I talk to the people I work with. But anyway, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we discussed when you're on an airplane, right? And they tell you they're going over the safety stuff and the little card that's in the seat pocket in front of you, right? Everything you hear, they say that if the oxygen mask drops down, right? If you are a parent traveling with a young child or somebody else who you're responsible for, right? You gotta put your own mask on first. They're very, very clear about that. And from the first time I heard that, even when I was a little kid, the first time I heard that, it just didn't seem right. And now as a parent, it seems even less right. It seems like just absurd. Like I would die for my children. There's no question I would die for my children. If it was a question of me dying and them living, there's not a question to that. It would not take me a nanosecond to make that decision, right? And so and most parents are going to feel that way, right? And so this concept of take care of myself before I take care of my child, that's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's so counterintuitive that it is absurd. But here's the thing, and here's the reason why it works that way. Because if the oxygen mask comes down out of the ceiling, right, it means that there's very little oxygen in the cabin, right? And this can be very quickly, it can become a situation where there is no oxygen left in the cabin. And when there's no oxygen in the cabin for you to breathe, guess what happens? You lose consciousness. And so if you are trying to put your child's mask on and you lose consciousness, now you're not able to take care of your child. And now both of you lose consciousness, and who knows what happens after that, right? And so it is actually, as a parent, it is actually, imperative that we take care of ourselves. And it doesn't have to just be in an airplane, right? It can be, just day to day, moment to moment. And that's true not just of parents, right? That's true of whatever you do in your life. Whether you have kids, you don't have kids, you're married, you're not married, you work, you don't work, whatever it is you do, right? If you're an accountant or an artist, the same thing applies, which is that if you want to have an impact on those around you, right? You want to provide your love to those around you. Well, then you have to love yourself first, right? We have to be able to tune this instrument. We have to be able to regulate this instrument in order to be able to give anything to anyone. So a lot of times, sometimes this work, when we say like, okay, take 10 minutes every morning and do your meditation, right? Sometimes it feels like, well, that feels selfish, Art. And I got, my kids need to eat breakfast, and I got to get to work, and I have people who depend on me, and I can't spare that time, and I don't want to be selfish for it, right? Well, that's the thing, right? That 10 minutes in the morning is you putting your oxygen mask on, right? The few times a day that you can pause and check in with yourself, that's you putting your oxygen mask on. The times where you can practice compassion for someone, literally the compassion exercises that I've given you, right? Where you picture, first yourself, then someone you love, then someone who's neutral in your life, and then somebody who causes you difficulty. Every time you do that, that is you putting your oxygen mask on. And once you've done that, once you have your oxygen mask on, now you can do great things in this world. You can do amazing things in this world. And I know that that's what you want, because that's why you're watching this podcast and listening to this podcast and watching this video. So I know this is something that matters to you. So it's not an act of selfishness. It's an act of compassion for everyone to take care of ourselves. So I hope that you're able to take care of yourself. And again, this includes everything, right? It's not just the meditation. It's also, minding what you're watching, minding your Facebook tendencies, minding what you're eating, minding what you're drinking, all of that, right? Because if, the other way to look at it, right, is, the oxygen mask, you could also look at, there's a classic saying, and I don't remember exactly the wording, but like, you can't feed someone from an empty cup. Right? You can only feed someone from a full cup. So it's imperative. You have a moral imperative for the rest of us to fill your cup, to put on your oxygen mask, to be the change that you wish to see in the world. Because once you change yourself, you will change me. And once you change me, I will change this person. And once I change this person, they will change that person. And that's how it works. And that's the beauty of this work. And it all starts and it all happens. The whole thing happens with 10 minutes in the morning and pausing a few times during the day and wishing people compassion and checking in with yourself. That's it. It's so silly, simple that it's ridiculous. But that's it. That is it, folks. You want to know more? Get in touch with me, okay? You can do this. And it takes no more than, a couple of months tops, before you're really rocking and rolling with this. And I would love to be there to see that happen. So if you have any questions, email me, comment below, whatever. And if you want to get in touch with me to actually talk about how I can help you to do this, right? Because that's the thing. We're not used to this, right? Again, like even when I was a little kid, it seemed absurd to me that I would put my own mask on first, right? We're not taught that, right? We're taught to be tough, to be, we're taught to be selfless. We're taught to be, we're taught selfishness is a bad thing and all that, right? And we're taught to mind your manners, speak to your elders properly and all that stuff, right? So everything's outward. So when all of a sudden somebody like me tells you, come back inward, it's like, what? How do I do that? I don't know. This is crazy. This doesn't feel right. I can't do this. Well, you can. And it's hard at first because you're not used to it. But with someone to help you, to hold your hand through the process, to show you how to do it, to give you the feedback on the progress that you're making, and to hold you gently and compassionately accountable to the work, that's all it requires for a lot of people. And believe me, you can go on my Google reviews and you can read them, right? If you look up Art Burns Coaching on Google reviews, you will see review after review after review of people who are describing exactly what I'm saying here. So if you want to be one of those people, I would love to see your name on one of my Google reviews. So if you'd like that, just get in touch with me. Go over to my website, artburnscoaching.com. The bottom of every single page, there's a banner that has a clock on it. Click the button in that banner. It says schedule a free appointment or something like that. You go into my calendar program, you look, I think the dates and times that are available are going to be like in a bold black, and the rest that are not available are going to be like grayed out, right? They won't let you click the ones that are not available. So whatever it is that you're not able to click, those are booked already. Look for a time and a day that works for you that is clickable. Click on it. It's like a 30-second process. You put in your name, your email address. I don't think I even have questions. I used to have questions to kind of, qualify people for the call and stuff like that. I don't even do that anymore. So, I mean, literally, it's just like 2 or 3 things that you got to fill out and hit save, and then you're done. And I take it from there, and I will remind you, and I will show up. You just show up at the time and day that you specified, and we will have what could be a life-changing conversation. Whether we work together after that or not, the conversation alone could be life-changing, and it costs you not a penny. I cover the cost on that. All right. But I'm getting busy though. I'm blessed because, I just, I'm blessed for a couple of reasons. A lot of my clients, they're just amazing, and I'm attracting more. So there is going to be a point where I have too many appointments that I won't be able to do that anymore. So if you want to have this conversation, time is of the essence. So I would suggest you do it sooner rather than later. All right, everybody, have a great day. I wish you well. And if you have any questions about this, please reach out, because this is really important stuff. This is the essence of everything we talk about. All right. All right, everybody. Thanks again. Wish you well. Take care.